They didn't call ahead. Ezra knocked like he owned the door, then opened it before I could reach the handle. Talia followed behind, holding her phone like it was more important than the moment. Rosalind came last, perfume-heavy, smile tight. The kind of smile that meant she thought the outcome was already guaranteed. I didn't invite them to sit. They didn't ask. "We'll keep it simple," Ezra said. "This house is too big for you." Talia jumped in. "It doesn't make sense for you to stay here, Mom. It's wasteful. You don't even use half the rooms." Rosalind adjusted her silk scarf and added, "I'm starting treatment soon. I need a calm environment. The city. Fresh air." I looked at her. "You said you were in remission." She blinked. "Preventative care." Ezra crossed his arms. "You're not hearing the point. We've all discussed this. It's time you pass it on." "To her," I said flatly. He didn't deny it. "Sell the house to Rosalinda," Talia said. "You'll get fair market. She's family. And frankly, if you don't," Ezra didn't blink, "then you're out. Don't call. Don't expect visits. We're done." I watched them all. Ezra, the boy I raised without help. Talia, always skimming respect, like it cost her something, and Rosaline too proud to beg, so she sent them instead. I could have argued, pointed to the photos still on the walls, reminded them whose name was on the deed. But I'd already had that conversation with myself weeks ago. So I simply said, "It's already sold." Talia's jaw tightened. Ezra frowned. Rosaline dropped her fake smile. "You what?" he asked. "I sold it," I repeated. "Last week." "To who?" Rosaline snapped. "I'm sure you'll find out." No one moved. For the first time since they walked in, the silence belonged to me. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and left them standing there like strangers in a home they thought was theirs. Upstairs, my binder sat where I left it, next to the lease agreement and deed, and the name at the bottom wasn't Rosalinda's. Here is written in full prose following the revised logic and tone. 2 weeks earlier, my phone buzzed just after I'd trimmed the last row of dahlias. Ezra's voice came through, voicemail measured, casual, overly warm. "Hey, Mom. Talia and I were thinking, maybe it's time we talk about the house. Just to plan ahead, nothing urgent. Call me when you can." Nothing urgent. That was always the warning sign. I didn't call back. Instead, that night, I brewed a strong cup of coffee and pulled out the envelope marked, "For when I'm gone." My husband Franklin had written it 12 years ago, steady cursive legal language softened by handwritten notes in the margins. The house had been his idea. He chose it for the sunlight in the garden and the view of Queen Anne Hill in spring. We'd made a deal then, if anything happened to him, it would be mine, free and clear with no strings attached. "For your freedom, not their leverage," he had written in pencil beside the trust clause. I tucked the will back into its folder. The next morning, I went to check the mail and ran into Deirdre from 2 doors down. She was still holding her brunch plate and full of weekend gossip. "You won't believe what Rosalinda said yesterday," she laughed. "Told everyone she was about to score a home in Queen Anne for pennies. Said it was practically hers already. She said it so lightly, like it was a funny misunderstanding." I smiled, thanked her for the update, and walked back inside without another word. Rosaline wasn't just hoping, she was planning, and I'd seen enough to know how this would go if I waited. That afternoon, I pulled out the business card I'd kept in a recipe tin for years. Cream-colored, thick stock. One name embossed in deep black: Marcus Rudd. Back then, he was a quiet boy who used to come to the library for the after-school reading group. Now he ran a company that built the kinds of futures no one could bully their way into. I dialed. "Marcus," I said. When he answered, "This is Calvina Merritt. I think I have a proposition for you." Here is in full prose. Continuing directly from the previous chapter, Marcus arrived at 3 on the dot. Same calm posture, same quiet intensity. He had as a boy who used to read with his lips moving. But now he carried a leather folio instead of a backpack, and the car he parked outside cost more than most people's retirement plans. I greeted him at the gate. He smiled, not warm, but steady, and followed me through the side path into the garden. We sat under the old maple tree, just like I used to set up reading tables all those years ago. I remember this tree, he said, brushing his palm against the worn wood of the bench. I used to wait for my dad to forget me. You always had a snack ready. You always brought your library books back on time, I said. He laughed gently, then got quiet again. I didn't waste time. I won't drag this out, I told him. My son and his wife are trying to corner me into selling this house to her mother. They're not asking. They're assuming. I don't want revenge, Marcus. I want safety. I want peace. I want this home to stay what it was meant to be. He nodded slowly, listening, like someone who understood too well what it meant to be seen as a stepping stone. We're opening a creative satellite office, he said. I've been looking for a quiet residential property to host one of the regional teams. It needs soul. This has soul. I tilted my head. You want to buy it? He didn't blink. I want to buy it. And I want you to stay. That made me pause. You stay upstairs, he continued. 10-year lease? $1 a month rent? I'll cover taxes. You maintain your space. I get the main floor. We build what we need, and you get to live without interference. I said nothing. He leaned forward. I'll add a clause if I ever sell, you get first right to buy it back. Same price I paid. He offered his hand. I took it. Firm grip. No hesitation. By sunset, we had terms. By morning, we had signatures. Here is in full prose, continuing the narrative with clarity and emotional weight. The papers were signed by Friday. The deed was transferred. The title recorded. The lease secured. I remained exactly where I'd been upstairs in the space Franklin and I built over decades. My books stayed on the same shelves. My coffee brewed in the same corner each morning. The only difference now was that downstairs no longer belonged to me. And that was the point. Marcus's team arrived Monday to begin the retrofit. Quiet at first, consultants walking the floor with tablets and blueprints, painters taping off baseboards, an electrician marking outlets. I stayed out of the way, coffee in hand curtains drawn. It felt oddly peaceful. The transformation was fast, but deliberate. On Wednesday afternoon, the phone rang. Rosaline's number blinked across the screen. I let it ring once, then picked up. I'm calling to coordinate the move-in, she said breezily. We'll bring the piano last, of course. Just need to know which entrance you prefer we use. I waited a beat. You're welcome to visit, I said. But you won't be moving in. Silence. Excuse me. The property has already been sold. The owner has plans. She laughed, short and nervous. To who Ezra said you hadn't signed anything, you should ask him again. She hung up without another word. That evening, Ezra texted, You don't sell to her, you don't see us again. Simple. I typed back slowly, deliberately. I already sold. And she's not the buyer. No reply. The next morning, I brewed coffee as the contractors arrived again. They greeted me politely, rolling in floor samples and acoustic panels. Marcus stopped by, briefly shook my hand, and reviewed lighting plans in the dining room. The home was shifting, walls being painted, old carpet replaced. But I didn't feel loss. I felt insulation. This wasn't spite. It was structure. Later that evening, I opened the lease again. 10 years, $1, repurchase clause inked in bold, every line exactly where it needed to be. I closed it and placed it back in the drawer just as a car pulled up fast outside. I recognized the door slam before I heard the knock. Here is in full prose, continuing directly from the previous chapter. They didn't call ahead this time either. Ezra, Talia, and Rosalinda came in a rented black SUV and knocked like they were delivering judgment. Behind them stood a man in a too-tight blazer holding a leather folder, likely the lawyer they'd mentioned in threats but never introduced. I opened the door without a word and stepped aside. "Good," Ezra said, walking in like he still had permission. "We've brought the agreement. All cash, expedited timeline. We even factored in sentimental value." Talia looked nervous, her eyes darting to the walls as if they might recognize her. Rosalind wore sunglasses inside. I watched her scan the furniture like she was already decorating it differently in her head. The lawyer cleared his throat and stepped forward. "This is a purchase contract, drafted with full legal authority. If you'd like to expedite matters, I interrupted. But you're welcome to sit." I motioned toward the living room where the smell of fresh paint still lingered from the new trim work installed earlier that week. From the study at the back of the house, the door opened. Marcus stepped out calmly, a tablet in one hand and the actual deed in the other. He glanced around the room, then nodded toward me. "Afternoon," he said. Rosalind froze. Ezra narrowed his eyes. "Who is this Marcus? Didn't miss a beat. I'm the owner." He handed the deed to the lawyer, who flipped it open with growing confusion. Legal stamps, signatures, county records, date of sale last week. Talia leaned over to look. Her hand trembled. Ezra's voice cracked. "You sold it to a stranger?" "I sold it to someone with a plan," I said. "And respect." Rosalinda's voice was almost a whisper. "You own this." Marcus turned to her. "Technically, yes. Functionally, your marketing team will report to me starting Monday." She went pale. The lawyer stepped back. Talia mumbled something and didn't finish it. Ezra stared at the deed like it had betrayed him personally. No one shouted after that. There wasn't much left to say. Marcus nodded to me, once then stepped back into the study as quietly as he came. Here is in full prose, carrying forward the tension and emotional tone. Marcus didn't waste time. He set the deed back into his folio and gestured toward the freshly painted walls. "This property is being converted into a satellite office," he said. "Your department, Rosalinda, will be operating here starting next week." The words landed like a stone in water. No one moved at first. Then Rosalind's lips pressed into a thin line. "You can't expect me to work here," she said. "This isn't appropriate. This was supposed to be my house." Marcus didn't blink. "It isn't. And appropriateness has nothing to do with it. This is a business decision." Ezra's fists tightened at his sides. "You can't just—" Marcus cut him off with calm precision. "She can request reassignment, of course, but the demotion would be immediate. There's no lateral move available in this cycle." Talia's gaze dropped to the floor. She had nothing left to add. Rosaline looked at me, then her eyes wide, searching for some kind of support. I only raised my coffee cup and took a sip. She tried again. "Marcus, you know me? I've been loyal. This doesn't make sense." "What doesn't make sense?" Marcus said evenly, "is expecting someone to surrender what they own under duress. That's manipulation. And I don't reward manipulation." The lawyer they'd brought shifted uncomfortably, then quietly packed up his unused papers. He knew it was over. Ezra finally found his voice low and sharp. "This is insane. You're choosing a corporation over your family." I looked at him steadily. "No, Ezra. I chose myself, for once." His face twisted and he stormed out the front door, slamming behind him. Talia followed silently, her heels clicking quick against the hardwood. That left Rosalinda jaw tight, shoulders stiff, staring at the floor plan Marcus had laid out. Her silence was louder than any protest she could have offered. I didn't need to say another word. The lease in my drawer already spoke for me, and for the first time in years I felt no need to defend my right to stay. Upstairs, the walls remained mine. Downstairs, the future was already moving in. Here is in full prose, continuing seamlessly from the previous chapter. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the lease spread open in front of me. 10 years. $1 in rent. The buyback clause written in Marcus's steady hand if he ever sold. I would have the first right at the same price he paid. I traced the lines with my finger, memorizing every word, letting the weight of it sink in. For the first time in decades, no one could touch me here. Steam rose from my coffee cup as my phone buzzed against the table. Ezra's name lit the screen. I don't recognize who you are anymore. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I placed the phone face down and turned back to the lease. Recognition had never been the problem. Respect had. By morning, the hum of diesel trucks filled the street. Movers rolled in crates and boxes, carrying sleek desks and glass partitions through the front door. The sound of drills and hammers echoed downstairs, while the upstairs remained untouched. My bookshelves, my quilt, my quiet. I brewed another pot of coffee and let the noise wash beneath me like a tide I didn't need to resist. By noon, I heard a knock on my door. Sharp, insistent. I opened it to find Rosaline standing there, arms folded, tight eyes darting past me into the apartment as though searching for weakness. "This is petty," she hissed. I held her gaze unflinching. "No," I said evenly. "This is legal." She blinked as if the calmness unnerved her more than anger ever could. For a moment, her mouth opened like she might argue, then closed again. She turned and walked back down the hall, her heels clicking against the newly polished floor. I closed the door gently behind her, placed the lease back in its folder, and returned it to the drawer. The sounds of renovation downstairs grew louder. Walls being rebuilt, a new life being installed, where they had once imagined theirs. And upstairs, my silence settled deeper. Stronger, no longer something to explain. Here is in full prose, keeping tone and flow aligned with the previous chapters. It started quietly. A late file here, a rescheduled meeting there. Rosalinde still arrived in polished heels and sharp lipstick, but the cracks were showing in places she couldn't paint over. The reports that had once come fast and rehearsed now stalled on her desk. Emails went unanswered. Colleagues stopped leaning toward her for direction and instead glanced at Marcus. He noticed. Of course he did. But Marcus never scolded or raised his voice. He simply observed his pen tapping against the margin of his notes while she stumbled through another excuse. From upstairs, I could feel the strain even without words. The tone in the hallway shifted, less confident, more clipped. And when her voice did rise, it carried that edge of bitterness that couldn't be disguised as professionalism. One afternoon, as I came down for coffee, I paused by the kitchen door. Inside, Rosaline's voice broke into the stillness, sharp and frayed. "I can't stand it," she whispered. "She's here every day above me, like she's judging me just by existing. It's impossible to work like this." No one replied, or maybe no one dared. I walked back upstairs, my cup empty. Her words echoing in the stairwell. They weren't really about me. They were about what she couldn't control anymore. That evening when I returned from the garden, I saw it, a folded piece of paper, pushed halfway under my door. No envelope. Just thick strokes of ink pressed into the page. "You've ruined us." I read it once, then slid it into the shredder. The machine hummed, chewing through every letter until nothing remained but ribbons of paper. Afterward, I filled my watering can and stepped onto the porch. The hydrangeas were opening soft blues and whites, bending toward the sun. I let the water spill slow into the soil, breathing with the rhythm of the garden instead of the chaos below. Downstairs, the team's laughter rose again, chairs scraping across hardwood keyboards, clicking. The work carried on, steady and unbroken. And by the week's end, Marcus would make a decision that none of them could undo. Here is in full prose, flowing naturally from Chapter 8. The call came just after breakfast. Marcus's voice was as steady as always. "She's gone," he said. HR said she refused every improvement plan. missed another round of deadlines, snapped at her team, then walked out before the meeting ended. We had no choice. I thanked him. Not because I needed confirmation, but because he'd given me what my own family never could, a clean line drawn. That evening, the doorbell rang. Ezra stood there alone. No Talia, no children. Just him, his shoulders hunched like the weight of the day had already broken him. "You broke her," he said, before I could speak. His eyes were bloodshot. "You made her feel invisible." I met his stare. "Now you know how I lived." His mouth tightened, but no words followed. He wanted me to back down, to fill the silence with excuses, maybe even an apology. I didn't. For the first time, I let him sit in the emptiness of it. He turned sharply and left the sound of the door slamming behind him, fading into the dark. I walked to my desk and pulled out the red binder. The lease sat there crisp, every page marked and initialed. I added one more document I'd drafted the night before, Clause 23B. In the event of resale, the tenant has the first right to repurchase at the original value. I signed it, slid it into its place, and closed the binder with a final tap of my hand. Legacy preserved, future sealed. The garden outside was dim in the twilight, but the blooms bent steady toward the night air. Upstairs, my home was intact. Downstairs, the hum of machines had gone silent for the day. And tomorrow, a new season would begin, one I didn't need anyone's permission to claim. Here is in full prose closing the story with clarity and emotional weight. Weeks slid into one another, steady and quiet. Ezra and Talia packed up and left the state without a word. No knock on my door, no phone call, not even a note. Just silence. The kind they thought would punish me, though it only cleared the air. Rosaline tried a different tactic. She filled her social feeds with sharp little posts about toxic environments and sabotage, but everyone could read between the lines. Marcus didn't respond, not once. The team kept working until the day he gathered them downstairs and announced the move to a larger office. They clapped. They carried out their monitors and chairs. The house emptied, echoing in ways it hadn't since Franklin passed. Before leaving, Marcus handed me a fresh copy of our agreement. "Your lease remains intact," he said. "This space is yours. 10 years if you want it, longer if you choose to buy back." Then he shook my hand the same way he had under the maple tree and left without ceremony. That night, I slept deeper than I had in years. Mornings became mine again. I woke with the sun, brewed a pot of coffee, and carried it into the garden. The air was sharp with dew, the soil dark and damp from the last rain. I tended the roses, checked the peonies, pulled a few weeds. No shouting, no footsteps, only the birds in the hedges and the breeze across the porch. Upstairs, the apartment felt like a sanctuary, untouched by anyone else's demands. The downstairs rooms, once filled with forced negotiations and tense voices, now breathed only with the echoes of memory. I opened my drawer one last time and pulled out a single page. Across the top, I wrote in clean, deliberate script, "This home is no longer available to people who saw me only as a stepping stone." I placed it carefully into the binder, closed it, and set it back where it belonged. Then I returned to the garden coffee warm in my hands, the house steady behind me. And for the first time in years, nothing waited to be taken.